This lecture we're going to talk about Chapter 6, Section 1, the logic of maximizing behavior. This Chapter 6 contains many concepts, so it's quite a wide-ranging chapter. I would say that probably the most essential concept from this chapter is efficiency. And in particular, in Section 2, we'll talk about consumer surplus and producer surplus. So these are sort of the final tools we need to fill out our supply and demand toolbox. And that has to do with efficiency. But in Section 1, we focus really on this idea about maximization and how economists assume that households and firms maximize. So this first aspect, this first part of the chapter really gets back to things we talked about in the very beginning of the class, and that is what are the characteristics of the economic way of thinking. And so one is that we assume that people are rational. And here we have a very precise notion of rationality, in particular that people maximize. They try to achieve a maximum of some objective. And so the objective for firms is to maximize what? Profit. But in this section, we even are a little bit more specific, and we define economic profit. It should be even a little bit different than what it says here. It should say the difference between total revenue and opportunity costs. Here it says total costs, but really the notion of economic profit is its total revenue minus opportunity costs. And that's different from accounting profit. In other words, accountants don't take into account opportunity costs. So that's an important distinction for you to be aware of. But anyway, getting back to the main aspect that we're talking about here is that individuals, households, and firms all maximize. Firms maximize economic profit. What do households and individuals try to maximize in their role as consumers? Pleasure, right, and or satisfaction. And economists have a special term for this. Does anyone know what that is? Utility. And so you may have heard the term utility before, and it was probably a synonym for usefulness. That's what most people mean when they say utility. For example, have you heard of a utility knife? It's a knife that's useful for cutting all kinds of things. But when an economist says utility, they mean something totally different, and in particular satisfaction or pleasure. So that's what households and individuals maximize. And they try to get as much utility as they can subject to their income. That means they have a limited income. But given their income, they try to get as much utility as they can. On the other hand, firms have a production technology. They can't produce more than their technology will allow, but they'll try to earn as much profit as possible. Now, this chapter gets a little bit tricky when it gets into the analysis of maximizing behavior. And they have chosen as an example of studying economics. And so here you have hours studying economics, right? You can study 0 hours. And if you study for 0 hours, is your score going to be? 0, right? Now maybe more realistically, if you're taking a multiple choice quiz, you get 25% of them right? You expect on average, if you know nothing, even if your little brother came in and never had economics, you get 25%. But anyway, we're going to assume 0. What about if you study for 1 hour? Then it's 18, 2 hours, 32, and so on. And if you study for 5 hours, you're going to get a 50. Maybe this is a 50-point exam, just like ours is going to be. And so that means you get 100% if you study for 5 hours. Actually, I think for most of you, you need to study for about 8 hours to get 100% on the exam. But this is a hypothetical example. Now, at the same time, you could be studying for another class. So let's say you have also an accounting exam that you're studying for. And so if you only have 5 hours that you can use to study for both of these classes, how should you allocate your time? That's what this question is about. And so in addition to the total score, or just the score you're going to get on the exam, depending on how many hours you study for, this table also shows what's called the marginal benefit, or you might say the marginal score. And this is how much your score will improve if you study for an additional hour. So remember, we also spoke about not an assumption that economists make. So getting back to the economic way of thinking, it's not an assumption that economists make, but it's an emphasis. And so economists emphasize thinking on the margin. So let's calculate the marginal benefits of an extra hour of studying. If you don't study at all, and then you study for 1 hour, your score increases by 18. What if you're studying for 1 hour, and then you study for an extra hour? How much does your score increase by? It goes from 18 to 32, and that's an increase of 14. So this is the additional score you get from an additional hour. Now, getting back to the accounting example, a similar relationship exists between hours studying for accounting and the score that you get. And so I took the information from the book and I created my own table. And so this is to get you to see, I think, more clearly than is demonstrated in the book, how to solve this problem. But I want you to note, so I'm going to solve it the easy way. And it's not the way that the approach the book took, because they want to emphasize marginal thinking. So it turns out in this example, it's actually easier if you don't use marginal thinking to find the right answer. But they want to choose an example that will illustrate marginal thinking, so we'll come back to marginal thinking. But instead, let's just try to think about the problem. How should you optimally allocate your time studying for economics and accounting? Well, to answer that question, you need to know the benefit of studying for accounting, right? So if you study for 5 hours, this is hours spent studying accounting, then you're going to get a 0 on your economics exam, right? Because if you study all 5 hours, that means you have 0 time left for studying for economics, so you get a 0. But by studying 5 hours for accounting, you get a 32. Right? Likewise, if you study for 4 hours, you're going to get a 32. So let's say you're studying for 4 hours accounting and for 1 hour economics. Should you increase the amount of time you study for the accounting exam from 4 to 5? No, right? Because your score stays the same. But your econ grade will go from 18 to 0. So you wouldn't want to do that. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's just continue with this example. 5 hours studying accounting gives you a 32. 4 hours studying accounting gives you a 32. 3 hours studying gives you a 30. And so on. Let's say your objective is to maximize the combined score on these two exams. So for example, if you care about maximizing your grade point average, that would be a reasonable objective that you might have. Let's add these scores together. So if you spend 0 hours studying economics and 5 hours studying accounting, you get a 0 in economics and a 32 in accounting, so your total points are 32, right? If you spend 1 hour studying economics and 4 hours studying accounting, you get an 18 in economics and a 32 in accounting, and therefore that is 50. Thank you. Here, 2 hours economics, 3 hours accounting, you get a total of 62. Here, you get a total of 66. Here, you get a total of 62, and here, 50. So at this point, it should be obvious to you how you should allocate your time. In other words, we solved the problem that we set out to solve. How should we allocate our time? Well, if we want to get the highest total points, we see that 66 is the biggest number, right? Which means we should study economics for 3 hours and accounting for 2 hours. We did not utilize marginal thinking to solve this problem. But for other applications, it's easier to use marginal thinking. So now let me illustrate how you would do that. First, let's calculate the marginal benefit of studying economics. So let's say that we're here. We're spending 0 hours studying economics and 5 hours studying accounting. What is the marginal benefit of moving from here to here? Well, our econ grade goes from 0 to 18. So the marginal benefit is we get 18. I'm going to just draw this new column kind of in the margins here. Right, so we get 18 additional points. What's the marginal cost? Well, we are studying for accounting less, and the change in our accounting grade, it turns out, is 0. So there's no cost for that, right? So it makes sense that we would shift 1 hour into econ studying, right? Should we go 1 additional hour? Should we shift an additional hour into econ? Well, if we do that, what's the marginal benefit? We go from 18 to 32, and that is an increase of 14. What's the marginal cost? 2. So again, the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost, so it makes sense to shift an additional hour into econ. So now we're here, spending 2 hours studying econ and 3 hours studying accounting. Should we shift an additional hour into econ? The marginal benefit is 10. The marginal cost is 6. So again, it makes sense. Let's consider the next one, going from 3 hours econ to 4 hours econ. The marginal benefit is 6, but the marginal cost is 10. And so at this point, 4 hours econ, 1 hour accounting, the marginal benefit is only 6, but the marginal cost is 10. In other words, our accounting grade will fall by more than our econ grade will rise, so we would not want to do that. This is the allocation that we would choose that is maximizing our total points. It turns out if we plot these, so let's say we plot the marginal benefit and the marginal cost curves. So the hours studying goes from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is hours studying econ. And since we're going to be plotting the marginal benefit and the marginal cost, we need to go to about 20. And so we see that if we go from studying 0 hours on econ to 1 hour for econ, the marginal benefit is 18. So from 0 to 1, the marginal benefit is 18. And notice I'm drawing this in between 0 and 1. It's because you're going from 0 to 1, and so it doesn't make sense to put it at 0, it doesn't make sense to put it at 1, you should put it in between the two. So that's 18. What about the marginal benefit of the second hour? That is 14. And again, this goes in between 1 and 2. Then the marginal benefit of the third hour is 10. The fourth hour, the marginal benefit is 6. And the fifth hour, we didn't compute this before, but we can see we go from 4 to 5, test scores increase by 2. And so we can plot this, and this is the marginal benefit curve. Now, likewise, we can plot the marginal cost curve. When we go from 0 to 1, here we are 0 hours studying econ. Because remember, this x-axis is hours studying econ. So when we go from 0 to 1, marginal cost is 0. Right? So between 0 and 1, marginal cost is 0. Between 1 and 2, marginal cost is 2. Between 2 and 3, marginal cost is 6. Between 3 and 4, marginal cost is 10. And between 4 and 5, marginal cost, we didn't do it, but we can do it here, is 14. And so if we connect these points, we see that they intersect here. 3 hours of studying. And so that is exactly what we found with our analysis of the table earlier, right? 3 hours studying econ is the best allocation. That leaves 2 hours to study accounting left. And so this is really the point of going through this exercise, is to show you that the optimal situation occurs where marginal benefits equal marginal cost. And this is just an important characteristic about the economic way of thinking. And so hopefully subsequent examples will help emphasize this more to you. But this was my attempt to present to you the material from the book in a little bit different way. But let's go back to the book now. So here is this exact same numbers of what we just did. We looked at that table a moment ago. We have a marginal benefit curve, and I just showed you how to draw that. This is a total benefit curve. Now, notice something about the shape of it. It's hard to see because they drew straight lines, but in general, it looks like this. It's curved, right? It's as hours spent studying increases, your grade increases, right? But look at the curvature of the line. It increases at a decreasing rate. And so in other words, when you're here spending 4 hours studying econ and you add 1 more hour, yeah, your grade goes up a little bit, but not by that much, right? Compared to when you were down here, you go from 0 to 1 hour studying, your grade increased by a lot. That has to do with the curvature of this line. Now, the curvature of this line is what makes the marginal benefit curve downward sloping. All right? And so in many situations, benefits increase at a decreasing rate. Many, but not all. But in the book, they sort of make it sound like almost all consumption activities or other activities have this type of shape. And I would say it's true for most, but not all things. You could come up with an example where it might be this type of curve, at least initially, but eventually probably most things do end up taking this shape. Eventually, you can imagine you spent too many hours studying, right? And you don't get enough sleep, and the curve actually goes down, right? Could actually start to fall. In the limit, let's say you spend 24 hours studying, you come to the exam and fall asleep, you get a 0, right? So that explains the shape of the curve. This is this figure here shows you the marginal benefit of accounting, studying for accounting. Notice the x-axis has changed here. This is hours studying for accounting test. But in fact, since studying for econ means you're giving up the opportunity to studying for accounting, the lower grade on the accounting is the opportunity cost. And so this is an example of the figure that I just drew for you, but here you have it in the book. Now the next figure, I need to highlight the fact that there are some typos in it for you. So this could make you crazy if you didn't know there were typos here. So let me correct them for you. This figure is fine, but this figure has typos, and I'll correct them now. You should make these changes to your book. Basically, these numbers are wrong. This is 2. This is 6. So it should be 2, 4, 6, 8. This is 10. 12. This is 14. And this is 18. So those numbers are wrong. And in addition, this number is wrong. This should say 18. And then over on the panel B, these numbers are wrong. This is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So they just messed up the in labeling the axes. But otherwise, now it's correct. I have also drawn this for you using the generic graph that I created and that I want students to use for their case in point articles and other things. So this generic graph makes it easy to draw graphs like these. So you see I've just duplicated it. What this is meant to show you is that the area under the marginal benefit curve equals total benefits. let me go back to the book. So if you go from studying from 0 to 1 hours, your scores goes up from 0 to 18, right? So the marginal benefit of studying for 1 hour is 18. The marginal benefit of studying for a second hour is 14, right? When you go from studying from 1 hour to 2 hours, the additional increase is 14. But that means the total benefit is these two together. That's 32, right? If you study for 2 hours, you get a score of 32. In other words, the area below the curve, right? Now here it looks like rectangles, right? And you might say, well, actually there's this little section here that's sticking out from the curve, right? But notice something else. The same size little section is not counted for here. And so it turns out this rectangular way of adding in the marginal benefits is equivalent to if you just took the area under the curve. It would be approximately, let's see if this is exact. So it would be 20 times 5 divided by 2, right? 1/2 base times height. So what's the area of this triangle? 20 times 5 divided by 2 is 50. What about if we add up these rectangles? 18 plus 2 is 20. 14 plus 6 is 20, and this is 10. So we have 20 plus 20 plus 10. That's 50, right? So that's important to note, that the total benefits are the area underneath the marginal benefit curve. Some of you are taking calculus right now, and you'll notice then that you might see a parallel there. The parallel is that the derivative of the total benefit function is the marginal benefit curve. So that's a relationship that you might notice with some of your other classes. Okay, so this area here is called net benefits between the two curves. Why is it net benefits? Well, net, what does that mean? When we say net profit or net benefits, it means you subtract out the costs. So let me show you why this is net benefits. Let's say we're consuming at point D. What are the total benefits of consuming at point D? The answer is this area from A to B to C to D. In other words, this whole area is total benefits of consuming at point D. This is the area here, right? Now, what are the total costs associated with consuming at point D? Well, the total costs are the area under the marginal cost curve. That would be, let me switch to a different color, this area here. Right? And so this area is total costs. Right? Total benefits minus total costs would be this area here. And here it's labeled as net benefits. So net benefits are total benefits minus total costs. What if we, instead of consuming at point D, we were consuming at another point, a smaller quantity, say point E? So look at here at panel B. So here we're studying hours E. The total benefits are this area. This is total benefits. What about the total costs? Total cost is this area here. Sorry, it's a little bit messy. Total costs are this area here. And so the difference are net benefits. But what about this purple triangle called deadweight loss? If we were at the optimum, right? If we were maximizing, net benefits would be this size. But since we're not maximizing, we're consuming a smaller quantity, we only get total benefits, we only get net benefits equal to this area. In other words, net benefits are smaller than they could be by this purple triangle, and we call that purple triangle a deadweight loss. So I promised that we would talk about efficiency in this section, and so this is a measure of inefficiency. Right? We're not optimizing if we're studying E hours. We should be studying D hours. And because we're not optimizing, this is inefficient, and the amount of the inefficiency can be measured by this triangle, and we call that a deadweight loss. So this is an important component of the supply and demand toolbox. As we'll see in a moment, we're going to relate this to supply and demand.